Welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for June 10th, 2021. We'll follow our standard agenda, which was tagged in issue number 1036. Before we get started on the issues tagged, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share? No announcements this week. I guess on to the CPC and board meeting updates. In terms of board meeting update, I don't have anything in particular. There is a board meeting, I think, in 2 weeks, but I don't have anything necessarily that's on the agenda to bring up there. So if there is something, let me know. I don't know on the CPC front. I don't think there's anything, of note to call out other than, the regular things that are going on. And anybody here, if you're interested, definitely, it's always open for people to go and get involved. I guess maybe the one thing worth mentioning on that front is, Rich, we did land the governance change, which required CPC approval, right? So that took place and got landed. Right, the charter changes, you mean? That one? Yep. Yeah. Yep. Great, thanks. Yep. Okay, so moving on to the issues tag. The first one is 38.943, adding HTML form data handling to core. I'm just opening that up to see. Matteo added to the TSC agenda. He says, I think the key questions to answer is what would it add to have this in core? Many things core is harder than maintaining the ecosystem. It adds a burden to a limited set of folks. And then there's some continued discussion and reference to the MIME type. We don't have Matteo today for context. Does anybody else have any sort of context thoughts on this one? It seems like this one is probably not time sensitive, and without Matteo, unless anybody here has a burning desire to weigh on it right here and right now, it seems like we could push it out a week and people can comment in the issue tracker. That sounds good to me.
So I guess like just one thing I would say, looking at this really closely or really quickly, I think there's maybe two different things to look at here, which I think are worth poking at. One is like the higher level feature, which seems to be like HTML form data handling, which my gut is maybe a little bit too high level. There's already a lot of great form validating options like multi-part and like we have a lot of ecosystem options. But it does seem like what they're pointing to regarding MIME is maybe, some lower level parts that we've wanted for other things in core as well that could make implementing form data handling easier potentially. So I think that, this does re-raise the conversation about potentially wanting to do more to explore that MIME module that I know Brad has been pushing for us to try to have for a while. And other platforms such as Python, for example, do have, like MIME databases that they ship with that are consistent.
Feels like that should be a comment in the issue tracker.
Well, then I will comment there.
Yep.
So that so that nobody has to repeat it next week, right? Yeah. And I'm impressed that you didn't mention fetch. You didn't work that in anywhere.
But you just did for him. Anyway, okay. So should any other comments, discussion on that one before we move on?
I'm just going to say for the people watching on Zoom, there are 9 attendees, even though you can only see 4. So that's why Michael is asking and waiting.
Yep. Okay, well, I don't hear any objections, so let's move on to the next issue, which is automating Npm updates with a bot, number 38879.
Seems like we did this and we needed approval, but we wanted to just make sure we discussed it at a meeting and like documented in the minutes that we're good with it. That's my recollection of, because I think I'm going to edit it or something. I have a comment in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I remember when I looked at it is like nobody had any concerns, or I think expressed any concerns, but wanted to make sure that it was mentioned so that if anybody else here did.
Well, Rui in particular wanted a positive statement that yes, we can use this bot, and so
right.
And I, so I suggested that we just mention it at a meeting, ask if anyone has any thoughts or objections, and then document in the minutes and be done with it.
I have a thought that I would love to just present to the group really quickly. So there was another issue or pull request that was opened that I believe got landed, that was automatically adding the fast track to the issues when they're opened. So like, we kind of talked about this before when I was trying to talk about like, hey, maybe we could carve something out in policy to make it easier for just getting approval for deps and stuff. So like the scenario that I want to outline here, and maybe I'll actually make a proposal, but it's like when we update deps in Node Core, other than V8 where we float patches sometimes or OpenSSL, like for the most part, like we're kind of taking things off the shelf as we're getting them from upstream and not making too many changes for it. And with the case of NPM, and I'll admit my bias that I'm part of this team, but it's like we're now at a point where we have a bot that automates the pull request to update the code that's vendored into Node Core based on like an artifact that's published that's not going to change. And then we're even talking about using an action to automatically add the fast track label to it. We have more than 2 collaborators that are on the NPM team that are immediately going to go in and thumbs up the fast track and then approve the PR so that we can actually land it in a timely fashion. And it just really starts to feel like we're kind of gaming the process so we can actually check the boxes off. Because like, I'm not going to do this, but I could write a bot that looks for every time that there's an NPM PR and automatically thumb up the fast track and automatically LGTM it, because like that's about the level of like approval that we need to do on these things. And it really just feels like the process that's in place is introducing unnecessary friction, and we're kind of jumping through hoops just to kind of check the boxes. And I'd like to, if people are not like immediately going to -1 it right now, revisit the process and policy that we have around PRs that are related to dependencies, because it does feel a little bit unnecessary to have all of these steps if like everything is in place to kind of more or less automate it if we wanted to.
I think it makes sense for there to be some kind of, narrow set of automatically fast tracked things that we can start with, if that's what you're proposing.
Yep.
I mean, I would put that in a separate issue, of course. I would
yeah. I think that's unrelated.
I just wanted to bring this up because I've opened a PR about this before and it was kind of shot down. But I think that this scenario is a great example of where like it feels like we're going through the process just to go through the process.
I mean, unfortunately, it's probably gonna have to be an incremental thing. Like you're gonna have to like just have narrow, concrete things that like this one, for example.
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3 of those, and then we just expand the list. If all goes well, we expand the list later, kind of thing.
Yep. I just didn't want to like kick off a discussion there again if anyone had a clear -1, because we did have a prior discussion that folks weren't on board with.
I kind of want to make sure we give space for the maintainers the releasers, to comment on that, because I feel like it's relevant to what they do, maybe, kind of, sort of. So who do we have from the releasers? We have Danielle, we have Beth, we have Miles. I think that's it. Anyway.
I think that sounds good. I find that when I am making releases, there's always like, hey, can we get this last NPM changing? Can we get this next one in? And so I think anything to help them automate that process this is Danielle speaking, by the way, I didn't turn my camera on. Anything to help them automate that process, just to create a little less friction, I'm +1 on. Yeah, I think that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, so maybe we should move back to this particular one. Just want to note in the minutes that people have taken a look at that and nobody has any objections to automating the npm updates with a bot. Okay.
I'll
Noted
take
in
the action
notes.
item to follow up on any policy related stuff.
Okay, good. So moving on to the next one. The next one is the future of the Node HTTP client 38533. I'm just going back. I know we've had this on the discussion before. I think, I'm just wondering if there's any more discussion that needs to take place on this one. Because I think, Robert had given the overview that they were hoping for, some references in the docs, I think, to start with to Indici in terms of like, hey, here's what people are working on. It's what that group is looking to is the future. And so it's, if you can try that out, help refine it so that it can become sort of the next gen, that would be good. And I think we had agreement on that. So I don't know that there's anything more on this. So I don't see anything recent in the issue unless anybody has any insight there. I guess my question is, does anybody remember why we kept it on the agenda?
Ruben +1 to what you said before in the chat. Just
okay. So I'm thinking, if I took a note, we discussed this before. Agreed with ask for references in the Node.js docs, taking off. So does anybody have any objection to me taking it off the agenda?
Should be
nope,
fine.
because someone can always add it back.
Right. Okay. So I'm just going to paste that into that note into the issue itself as well. Where is it? This one. Comment and remove from the agenda. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is tracking issue, commit queue, issues, and feedback. This is number 34770. I know, Mary, you added this to the agenda. Do you know the context, next steps?
I don't think I added it to the agenda, but I probably have context on it.
Okay.
Just give me a minute to open the.
Or sorry, you opened the issue. So maybe
I opened
somebody
the
else
issue.
might.
So the issue is just a running issue for folks to share feedback or issues related to the commit queue. For context, the commit queue has not been working for a few months because there is a token problem, GitHub token problem, and the number of folks that have access to the GitHub bot account, as well as have access to the Nodecar tokens page, is basically myself and Choi, and I don't think either of us had time to go and try to make it work yet. Also, it's a bit hard because GitHub doesn't tell you which permissions are missing on the token. So it's kind of a game where you have to guess what you need to add. But I was not the one that added to the agenda, so I'm not sure why it's on the agenda.
I think it may have been, I see Richard added onto the agenda basically saying, hey, it's not working. And he has a comment of like, if we're unable to maintain it, maybe we should remove it. So that's what I see just before it was added.
Yeah, I don't disagree with it, but at the same time, I think it would be good if we at least try to fix it first.
So I think, the couple of for the specific reason it was added to the agenda, it's kind of like, as a group here, what do we think? I'd agree with Mary. We can give it more time in terms of saying, well, let's leave it. Let's not do anything until some more time goes by. What other people think? I guess, does anybody advocate for removing it, like disabling it or something like that? Or, in absence of that, I'd propose we say, we talked about it and we're okay with leaving it as is for longer.
I think we should leave it as is for a bit longer. I can try after the meeting to see if there's anything obvious that we can try. But as I said, since the error message doesn't say which permissions are missing, I have absolutely no idea what I have to check on the token, and I don't want to give a token with full access to everything. But I can try to configure it at least.
Okay, so I'm basically going to take the agenda tag off with the comment that says, we discussed in the meeting today, nobody advocated for moving it, so let's leave it for a bit longer, try to fix.
Does anyone object to removing it? I think those are different things.
Sorry, you're asking if anybody would object to removing it?
Yes, because advocating for removing it and
yeah.
I'm fine with leaving it, and I'm fine with removing it. I have no objection to the approach. I totally trust you and Joy and other people to figure this out, and I will happily get involved if needed. But I don't think I have any insight or knowledge to add here, so I'm just like, trust you folks.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment as well. Like, I wouldn't advocate for removing it, but if you came back, and the people who were maintaining it said, well, we can't manage to get it to work, we can't maintain it, let's remove it, I would agree with that as well.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to just add those two comments to the issue and remove the agenda tag. Okay, where is that?
Five-minute warning on Miles leaving in case there's any issues that we need Miles for.
I don't know, Miles, do you have any of the following issues that you want to participate in?
Just eyeing right now. Nothing specific that I think I have anything particularly amazing to contribute to.
Okay, well then we'll just move on to the next issue, which is rename default branch from master domain or something similar. That one, I've just been sort of poking along on a number of them. A number of the easier ones, just posting issues, basically saying, hey, do you mind if we rename? Don't think there's going to be too much of an issue. So we'll pretty soon be down to the ones that are going to require more work. So again, if anybody has cycles to help out, that would be great, particularly on some of the more complex ones where we're going to have to figure out, like, do things need to change, that kind of stuff. But have made a significant progress from the beginning, at least. Any other comments on that one? Okay, the last one is migration of core modules to primordials. This is number 3697. I know we did discuss this before. I think we left it on the agenda so that we would continue to talk about it. There was some discussion, and I see, Ruben, you have a few comments, so maybe you want to lead the discussion on this one.
Yeah, so I posted something that we did not really find an actual use case so far why we do this. Well, it has a couple of downsides that are obvious, such as performance penalties that are non-obvious, and much more complicated code that is more difficult to read, that might also prevent other people from partially contributing. And before we do have a clear reason to do this, besides making the REPL work with any code, I personally would like to stop porting more code to primordials. And I would suggest to continue the discussion in the issue as long, at least for like, let's say 1 or 2 weeks more, and then we could put it back on the agenda to see how far it went.
That sounds good to me. I think this is probably something that eventually TSC is going to have to engage with, you know, but yeah, there's no rush.
So I think the suggestion of letting the discussion continue in the issue for a few weeks, then bring back to TSC. That I can see is pretty non-controversial. The other suggestion was like we actually say we're not going to land any primordial PRs until that happens.
Yeah, pretty much. I personally would suggest that. In fact, I did block 1 PR today.
I mean, if you don't mind blocking them all yourself, you don't need TSC approval to stop any primordial stuff from landing until the conversation happens.
Yeah, that's fine for me. I can do that.
I mean, and you can just, to prevent looking like you're being, you know, whatever, obstructionist, you can just leave a comment that said, per TSC discussion, we're going to wait on landing more primordial stuff until, you know, and
yeah.
and if I see any, I might do that too, but I've been less active in the issue tracker lately.
Yeah, I think because we don't necessarily have like enough, we don't have enough of the TSC to say we've got like a majority or consensus or whatever on saying we're going to stop on that. But I think you blocking
and
them,
even if we did, a bunch of us would probably have to, you know,
read
do
up
some homework before before we confidently state an opinion anyway.
But I think it's totally, you know, what Rich is suggesting makes total sense. If you know, basically say you can comment saying I'd like more TSC sort of discussion before this proceeds, and you know, block it. That's I think that's the best way to go.
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion that we should have this week on that one then? If not, I guess, like, I know you said a couple weeks, but I'd say let's leave it on the agenda rather than taking off and putting it back on, just because it's a good reminder. That takes us to the end of the issues. We can flip over quickly to the strategic initiatives. So let me just take a look at that. Okay. Just looking at who we have here in terms of that mapping. I don't have anything on build resources. I don't know, Mary, if there's anything new on the future of build chain.
No, I don't have any updates on that one.
Okay, so I don't think we have any updates this week then. Updates this week. So that takes us to the end of the agenda. Are there any other things that people think we should talk about before we close out for this week? If not, thank you very much for everybody taking the time to attend and those who are watching, and we will see everybody in GitHub and next week. Thanks.